great to welcome back Pete Jensen, and because it's hockey, we welcome back Pierre.
What's going on, Steve? Great to catch up with you. It's been a few minutes, right?
Yeah,
since we last talked, but
way
a
too
lot
long.
has changed. We got through the COVID-shortened seasons, of course, and now we're going to have. I mean, let's be honest. The Tampa Bay Lightning and the Colorado Avalanche have probably been the two best teams in the NHL over the past 3 seasons combined. It's been a matchup I've been dreaming about actually happening, and it's finally here. Two of the true juggernauts in the sport. A lot of star power. Great to be on with you, and great to get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into something that is interesting because Tampa Bay, to me, I think over the years recently, we've had a lot of champions that are really, really good, but nobody great. Tampa Bay is on the verge. I mean, Tampa Bay is that. They're back-to-back champions. They're a legitimately great hockey team. But they're also going to play the first 2 games in Denver. And I've heard nobody bring this up. What kind of effect potentially is altitude on a team that never plays at altitude? Because Tampa Bay doesn't play at altitude.
Oh, it's definitely a factor that nobody's talking about it. I was thinking about it this morning because I had family in Denver, and just when you go there, you got to be hydrated. You got to give yourself a couple of days to adjust, really, to the conditions and stuff like that. So with the altitude, so yeah, I think it's something worth mentioning. I don't know that it's going to be a huge factor. Obviously, the Avs are sitting pretty after sweeping the Edmonton Oilers. They had 2 sweeps this postseason. And I don't think that the rest will necessarily work against them because that's been a team in the Colorado Avalanche that has dealt with multiple COVID outbreaks, tons of injuries. Even earlier in the year this year, so many injuries throughout the lineup. They were more than equipped to, say move like one of their best players, Mikko Rantanen, to the center position. And now that could prove really valuable because Nazem Kadri, one of their best players, is injured. He might return at some point in the series, but they're not as fortunate as Tampa Bay is, where Tampa Bay sounds like they're getting Brayden Point back, one of their top goal scorers, for Game 1 tonight. So, yeah, I think it could prove to be a factor, at least for Game 1. But Game 1's going to have rest versus rust for the Avalanche themselves. Of course, the Rangers Lightning series just wrapped up over the weekend, so maybe Tampa's juices will be flowing a little bit more than Colorado's, but it should be a tight one. Very unpredictable, as always, in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, Brayden Point did work on the power play with Tampa Bay in practice the other day. It sounds like he's going to play, and there's very few players currently that, especially if it goes to overtime, he's the guy you pick to score that overtime goal. What does his addition mean to Tampa, to the firepower they already have?
It's huge. I mean, they went 9-2, the Lightning, without Brayden Point. How they did it with lesser depth than previous postseasons. Of course, their whole third line from the previous 2 postseasons is not on the team anymore. They swept the Florida Panthers without Brayden Point, so they're extremely difficult. They won 4 straight games against the Rangers after the Rangers had them on the ropes, right? After the first 2 games of the series, won 4 straight games without Brayden Point. And you mentioned it. I mean, that's a great observation. If anyone has been their biggest closer in the playoffs over the past 2+ postseasons, it's Brayden Point. He scored that 5 overtime winner 2 years ago. He scored back-breaking goals for the opposition, kind of those like rip your heart out type goals that has led to some big individual victories and series victories for the Lightning. So it's a huge lift, honestly, and maybe the line will change a little bit, but when Tampa Bay, with the expectation that they would probably get Brayden Point at some point in this series back in the lineup, like they're big underdogs, and I just don't quite understand it because I feel like this series is very close to a toss-up. For every MacKinnon, you have Kucherov and Point. And Stamkos. For every Kale McKinnon, you have a Victor Hedman. And then, of course, the goalie matchup is, I think, a big advantage for the Lightning with Vasilevsky. So I think it's closer than the odds suggest.
Yeah, I was about to mention the Vasilevsky factor because I realize that part of this is Colorado has faced more firepower in the West. I mean, Edmonton has firepower.
Right.
No getting around it. But it looks like at least on paper that Tampa has a huge advantage with Vasilevsky in net. What do you think?
No doubt. I mean, the first round for the Avs when they swept the Predators, they didn't even face Nashville's top goalie. They were facing the second and third stringers. UC Saros, had faced him, that's an elite goalie, but they missed out, and that was a good thing for them. Jordan Binnington was red hot, but then he got injured for the Blues in the series in the second round against the Avs, so they kind of got off easy a little bit there too. And then third round, they were playing against Mike Smith, who's a decent goalie, but 40 years old. I mean, that was a cakewalk for them. So they haven't faced anybody close in the playoffs to this point to Vasilevsky, who just beat Shesterkin from the Rangers and kind of reaffirmed his status as the best goalie in the league. So that's a big matchup discrepancy, like you mentioned.
All right. So I was doing basketball in the Mullins Center back in November at UMass. And not only do they have the national championship banner up there, they also have a banner for Kale McKinnon up there.
Nice.
A Hobie Baker Award winner and so forth. All right. What we know Victor Hedman obviously is that steadying presence for everything Tampa does on the blue line. What kind of two-way player as a defenseman has Kale McKinnon become in this league?
Yeah, he's got like the speed and electricity offensively of like Connor McDavid, but he's just as responsible on defense as all the other top defensemen out there, whether it's Hedman or Roman Josi from Nashville or, guys like that are really stout two-way players. So he's really the full package. You mentioned like the Hobie Baker and stuff. Like he might win the Conn Smythe if it ended today based on his historic performance in point production, like 22 points in 14 games after his 5-point game in the clincher for the Avalanche against Edmonton. So, yeah, Kale McCarr is the class of the league, not only just at the defenseman position, but even his offensive game stacks up to all the best in the game, whether it's, the two guys in Edmonton, McDavid and Draisaitl, or Austin Matthews, or Nathan MacKinnon from his own team. He's even surpassed MacKinnon on the Conn Smythe big board based on his level of production in the postseason, and MacKinnon's a forward, so it's really remarkable how far along he's come. He's still so young. He's only been in the league for a couple of years.
Because they play out west, and look, I mean, I'll watch games, but they don't, for example, for the fans around here, they don't play the Penguins that often.
Right.
For the uninitiated, tell us about Nathan MacKinnon's game, because I think this is a special talent that is an absolute star.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's been a stud in the playoffs this year, and not even that many people are talking about him because of McCarr's outburst and how well McDavid and Draisaitl were producing for Edmonton. But he's scoring nearly a goal per game in the playoffs with 11 and 14 games. He's a shots-on-goal machine. For anybody looking at, props and stuff out there, his shots-on-goal props are usually sometimes double what a normal player's props are because he's got 80-something shots in, less than 20 games for the Avalanche. So it's been amazing to see his career progression. He's not the captain of the Avalanche. He's not the highest-paid player on the Avalanche, but he's a super talented player that stacks up to any other player around the league. We've had McDavid versus MacKinnon debates before for fantasy, and it usually sides with McDavid, but he's right there in that conversation. And he comes from the same area of Canada that Sidney Crosby's from, and there are a lot of parallels to Crosby's game that he has shown in his development over the years too. So again, end to end, he's just as good as McDavid is in terms of bursts of speed, coast to coast goals. We've seen some of them this postseason already. It's going to be really fun to watch him. He's the most explosive forward in this series. So, and maybe if he blows up here, he could, get the Conn Smythe if the Avs win. But again, him going up against Vasilevsky, that's a big matchup because he kind of dictates the style of play on every single shift that he steps onto the ice.
How important will be the power play for each team?
Yeah, I think the power play for Tampa has bailed them out a lot in recent years, in recent series. We see, that one crucial game against the Rangers in Game 3 when they were at home. The Rangers played a great game. They were up 2-0, but they committed some costly penalties. Their discipline was questionable, and Tampa made them pay. Tampa's power play over the past 3 postseasons is operating like between 26 and 30%. So they're pretty much automatic. If you give them, 4 or 5 power plays in a game, you're probably going to lose. And then the Avalanche on the other side have 2 great power play units that can match them pound for pound. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see these two teams, especially. I really hope as a fan that we get to see not only Brayden Point, but also Nazem Kadri, who brings like that physical element to the Avalanche. And hopefully he comes back at some point in this series, because this could be a series with some really quality goaltending, but also gets high scoring at certain points because of all the offensive firepower on both sides.
So we'll do this 2 ways. We'll start with this. Tampa Bay wins the series if?
Yeah, I think if Vasilevsky is, going at like a 920 plus save percentage, they'll win the series. It's really as simple as that. They have their big 5 healthy now that Point is back. So they got Stamkos and Hedman and Kucherov, who leads the playoffs in points over the past 3 postseasons combined. Steven Stamkos really coming alive lately. Yeah. He had a career year this year, by the way. Steven Stamkos, we think about him like 10 years ago when he scored like 55, 60 goals, but this was Steven Stamkos' first career 100-point season this year. So he's not half bad either, and he's like the 3rd or 4th best player on the Lightning. So, yeah, I think if the Big 5 is healthy for Tampa and Vasilevsky's playing up to snuff, they'll probably win this series. Vasilevsky in the first round against the Toronto Maple Leafs was very shaky, but they just couldn't finish. They couldn't finish him off, with that final goal in Game 6 or 7. That's the biggest problem. Is like Tampa's so good with John Cooper and his adjustments that it's just so no team out there has been able to actually finish them off and slay the beast. So until somebody does it, I think they're still the team to beat out there, and they got the star power to do it.
When the Rangers won the first 2 games, that was the first time in years that Tampa had lost back-to-back games in the playoffs. Years. That is stunning.
It is.
Tampa Bay has now won 11 consecutive series. Think about that. They've won 11 consecutive series. Now, let's flip it. Colorado wins the Stanley Cup if?
So, yeah, I think they might need Kadri to come back at some point. They're going to need their depth guys to really step up to the plate and deliver, whether it's MacKinnon, which they acquired him at the trade deadline, guys like Nichushkin, JT Compher that have come to play in big ways. At different points in the playoffs, they're going to need consistency from the bottom 6 forwards because, like I said, Tampa's great third line from recent years, Barclay Goodrow, Yanni Gord, Blake Coleman, they're all gone. And that's been a storyline all season. And all season I've been kind of saying, is Tampa capable of going on a deep run with lesser depth, with all the hockey they've played? Yes, they are, and they did make another deep run to the Cup final here. But could it eventually come back to haunt them or catch up to them? Yes, and that's why my preseason prediction, which looks really good right now, it was Avalanche over Lightning. That was my justification for not having the Lightning three-peating because of that weakness in the bottom 6. Now, some of these guys on Tampa Bay have exceeded expectations. Nick Paul, big trade deadline acquisition. Corey Perry has been in the NHL for so many years and still playing on first power play and producing in the 4th line and stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if that lack of depth from the previous 2 years comes back to haunt them a little bit, just because of the type of juggernaut team that they're facing in this round in the Avalanche.
Pete, always a pleasure. Great work, as always, and great to talk with you.
Oh, awesome to be on with you guys. Great memories from my time at Penn State, no doubt, and great to see it become such a hockey town over the past decade, right since I left. Go figure.
Yeah, as soon as you left, we'll build an arena. All right. Pete, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Enjoy the Cup final tonight, ABC. It'll be a great scene.